Today we're talking about stigma. What is stigma? How does it affect us? And how can we be stigma busters?
So, stigma is one of the pillars we've been working closely with as a work group. This whole episode is going to focus around stigma. But I think before we jump into our conversation surrounding stigma, it's important to define the word first. There's a definition that was found in a Healthline article in October of last year, and it cites the sociologist Irving Goffman, who repurposed the term in the early 1960s and gave stigma its modern definition. In a nutshell, Goffman basically states that stigma refers to any negative attitude, prejudice, or false belief associated with specific traits, circumstances, or health symptoms. Discrimination, which is a related but distinct concept, describes how someone treats you because of the stigma. And as a work group, we have been working with this definition as well. But I'm open it up to any of the panelists that wish to add or amend certain parts of that definition as they wish to do so.
Well, listening to Jack say this again, I wanted to open up an idea for everyone. If every single stigma is in fact a negative attitude or prejudice, because I have been looking into stigma when preparing to talk about this, and some of them are stigmas related towards positive subjects or meanings. And I have never thought of that before, and I personally don't know how I feel about that, seeing as my definition has always included stigma to be around something negative.
I mean, I think it makes perfect sense for stigma to encompass positive seeming things because I feel like a lot of the time, especially if you have a disability or if, there are certain traits that people think are good because it's like a positive stereotype. I guess part of that stigma to me would also mean like people say something positive and they expect something of you that's like superhuman. You can't do it. I mean, it's like if you don't meet that, then that eventually becomes negative.
I totally hear where you're coming from. I generally think of that more as stereotypes, and stigma more as like a negative connotation associated with something, but that's just the way I've always thought about it.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. So I very much relate to what Annie was saying on my perception of stigma has for many years has been understanding of it being a negative way. I know there's four different structures of stigma. We have self-stigma, social public stigma, structural stigma, and then there's other forms of stigma that can include perceived stigma, stereotype stigma that was associated, stigma that even health practitioners may have, other labels that make them be avoidant. So I think stigma has my understanding of stigma is a view of it as a negative way, besides just the stereotypes. Because I think that yes, there's stereotypes, and they're mainly rooted from those that stigma that is perceived either by within mental health, within a race, within ethnicity, within other forms of identity, and its intersectionality of it.
Those are all really interesting points. So the definition that we had come up with as a group, which I would like to know everyone's opinion if it kind of has shifted a little bit, but the definition we came up with, which is very similar, is that stigma is a negative misconception, implicit and explicit, towards cultures and adverse communities and individuals. So I kind of want to get anyone's take on if that definition still stands or if we'd like to add or amend to it. Again, that's the definition we came up with as a work group earlier this year.